Hello, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Were you speaking?
No, I never even heard anything start.
Oh, okay. No
It still says
worries.
start recording on my thing. So are we ready to go?
Yes, I'm going to mute myself again, and I think everyone should be able to hear you so you can get started.
Perfect,
Sorry
thank
about
you.
that.
It's
No
okay.
problem.
Hi, everybody. This is Rebekah Lewin from University of Rochester Simon Business School, and I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us today. We've partnered with Beat the GMAT for an admissions webinar on a really important topic that I'm sure is going to benefit you regardless of whether you're planning on business school for the near term or you're thinking about pursuing an MBA at some point later on. I'm sure one of the things you're considering is how you're going to pay for business school, and today's session is going to talk about just that. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself and the context about which I will be sharing today, I've worked in business school admissions for more than 15 years, and I'm also an advisory board member with several organizations that you may have heard of before. The Forte Foundation, which is looking to increase the number of women attending MBA programs, the Consortium for Graduate Study and Management, whose mission is to increase the number of underrepresented U.S. minority candidates that are pursuing an MBA and positioned for positions in management. And also I'm on the school advisory board for the MBA tour. And so I've had opportunities through those affiliations to connect with my colleagues across the industry, and I'll be sharing insights that are going to have a broad impact on your understanding of how to finance your studies, and I will spend some time at the end of the session talking specifically about University of Rochester. Today's session will probably be around 20 to 25 minutes of talking points, and then I will open it up to Q&A, and so you're welcome to use the questions segment of the online discussion board to type your questions in. I can't promise that I'll have time to discuss all of them, but I will do my best to allocate time for as many of them as possible. As I said, we're going to talk a little bit about funding options for the MBA, and today's session will focus more on full-time MBA opportunities, which typically entail scholarships and grants, different kinds of student loans. I'll talk a little bit about some tips for accessing this funding. I will go over some of the scholarship opportunities that the University of Rochester Simon Business School has and give you some next steps as you're planning for 2016. So let's talk a little bit about funding your MBA study. As I said, I'll talk more about full-time MBA, but I've given a side-by-side chart that talks a little bit about the similarities and differences between full-time and part-time programs. Most full-time programs offer merit scholarships for their full-time candidates, and that's usually because full-time MBA students have quit their job to come to business school, and so there's going to be a more significant investment that a full-time student will make in pursuing their studies, and so scholarships are a way to offset that. Many full-time MBA programs also offer different kinds of assistantships. They may also offer grants or outside scholarships, and those could be through a variety of different organizations. There are student loans. Many students are saving their own funds to help support their business school studies, and there may be veterans benefits that are available for some students. Part-time MBA students have access to some of those same opportunities. The main differences are some part-time students will have benefits from the company where they work, and so those tuition benefits may cover a portion or all of the cost of their tuition. There's typically fewer opportunities for scholarships and usually not any opportunities for assistantships for part-time MBA students. So today's session is going to talk about full-time programs and full-time scholarship opportunities and so on. And so let's talk a little bit about sources of funding that come from an MBA program or directly from the school. Those scholarships are usually quite competitive. Most of them are merit-based, and so they're going to look at your credentials as a candidate after you're admitted, and they will compare you to other candidates who are also admitted. They will directly reduce the cost of your tuition bill, So it's an offset. It could either be a percentage of tuition or it could be a flat dollar amount in scholarship. It may require a separate application or a separate essay, and there's typically some sort of a deadline by which you need to apply to either guarantee a review for scholarship or to maximize the scholarship opportunities that you are eligible to be reviewed for. Typically, the admission and scholarship decisions are not linked. I know that that is a question that comes up a lot where students worry, if I say I'm interested in scholarships, does that increase or decrease my chances of being considered for admission? You know, that may vary a little bit from school to school, but typically there's two separate decisions, one about whether you're going to be admitted and then one about whether or not you'll be offered scholarship, and if so, what amount. In many cases, the scholarship is renewable if it's a 2-year MBA program for your second year based on meeting certain criteria such as a GPA threshold and the MBA program. But pay close attention. That's a question that's worth asking. You know, is it an automatic renewal, or do you have to reapply for funding in the second year, and what the criteria would be for consideration. Graduate assistantships are another type of funding that are available. They typically require some level of work or service, and so it might be working for a department, it might be working for a faculty member. It varies by school in terms of whether it would be in your first year or in your second year. I would say most MBA programs the first year is going to be a little bit more demanding in terms of job search, in terms of the overall academic load, and so more frequently you see graduate assistantships being available in the second year of the MBA program, but again, this might vary a little bit by school. Some of the assistantships are going to be based on your academic credentials, if you're working with a faculty member, for instance. Some of them may require a special skill set, you know, and that might be the case if you're working, say, in the Career Services Office, providing, advising to students on, you know, that are interested in careers in a particular area. Well, you need to have had work experience and or an internship in that particular field, and you probably also need to have reasonably strong interpersonal skills if you're going to be in a student-facing sort of role. Whereas, you know, if you're doing grading for a faculty member or research for a faculty member, that's a different skill set, and there may be different emphases. So I only mention that because while it is money that can be used toward funding your studies, you want to find something that's a good match for your skills and your expertise and the value that you would add to the organization. In general, it's best to apply early for these opportunities. That being said, however, rushing through the application process or submitting a sloppy application just to meet an early deadline will not necessarily make you more competitive for admission, much less for scholarship support. So for all of you on the call who are U.S. citizens or residents, there's a few really easy ways to apply for educational loans. The first is funding that's facilitated by completing your FAFSA, your free application for federal student aid. That's money that you qualify for through the Federal Direct Loan Program. It doesn't look at your credit score. It doesn't look at how much you know, loans you've obtained at the undergraduate level or other things like that. Essentially, if you're enrolled in a full-time program and the cost of that program is more than $20,500 per year, you know, then you would be eligible to apply for funding. Most schools will put together a cost of attendance that looks at the cost of tuition plus an average budget for living expenses that takes into account housing, meals, transportation, books, all of the basics. There are likely to be some expenses that you will incur that may fall outside of the average budget, and those expenses may or may not be deemed expenses that can be covered through an educational loan. So it's really important to work with the school and their financial aid office to understand you know, what aspects of your personal budget fit within the cost of attendance, to make sure that you are either adjusting your expenses or your expected expenses during business school to the extent possible, or making appropriate alternative arrangements for how you're going to pay for those other sorts of expenses. There are also private loans beyond the federal direct loan program that should be able to cover the full cost of attendance. That will require a credit check, and we'll look at your credit score, it'll look at your debt income ratio, and depending on those different analyses, it may actually require a cosigner. So some of my next steps are going to involve looking at your personal finances and making sure that those are in order prior to business school. For those of you who are international students, and that's individuals who will require a student visa to enter or remain in the U.S. during your MBA program, there may be some different loan options for you. Some of those depend on the school's arrangements. There may be loans that the school offers without a cosigner that could cover a portion or up to the cost of attendance. Those vary by school and are usually a school-specific program. There may be loans that you can take through a private loan, through an educational loan, that would require you to have a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident who serves as a cosigner. And so you need to have someone who is not only credit worthy but also willing to cosign for you. You may also be aware, or you may want to pursue looking into loans through your home country. That might be through your bank, it might be through a government agency, but those sorts of opportunities may be available for you as well, and those could be educational loans, or they could be private loans, depending on the country where you will be coming from. So where should you start? You know, you're definitely early in the process, but this whole process is going to go by rapidly, as you will probably realize. There's a lot to do, and so right now you're hopefully researching the timing for admission and scholarship consideration from the schools that you're going to be applying to, figuring out those deadlines and what those requirements are. Once you have your MBA application submitted, as well as any scholarship applications that are part of that MBA application, then the next step, while you're kind of in the waiting game about whether you're going to get interviews or ultimately what the decision will be from each of those schools, that's a great window of time to start looking into outside sources of funding. And so there's a lot out there. I definitely would suggest doing your homework. Some of these scholarships or grants are based on your family background. Some might be based on what you're interested in pursuing in terms of your career path. Some might be based on past service or all sorts of other scenarios. And so that's probably going to be worth your time if you pursue it. You know, the scholarships and grants could range from a few $100s to thousands of dollars. And so we would definitely recommend that you look into those sources of funding. And it's never too early to start getting your finances in order. I encourage students that before you are in grad school, you should start spending and saving as if you were a grad student. And so looking to reduce your debt, paying your bills on time, setting aside savings, you know, those are all important things to do before you reduce your income, and will hopefully put you in a better position financially when you're going through the MBA program. It will limit the amount of additional debt that you need to take during the MBA program, and hopefully ensure that your credit score is appropriate, so that your interest rates and your terms on any debt that you're taking are as advantageous as possible while you're in the MBA program. So let's talk a little bit about these private funding sources, because there is a lot out there. You know, each of these opportunities has a different application process and different criteria to consider you, and so it does require quite a bit of time on your part to do the research. There's not just a, you know, go here and there you'll automatically get, you know, free money for your MBA. It's definitely going to involve some hours of work to research the opportunities and ultimately to apply, because each application timeline and each process is different. Some might require you to write an essay, some might require you to fill out an application form, Some might require recommendations, and so you'll want to carefully review that. Some may require U.S. citizenship or residency, and so you want to pay attention to that. Some might even require that you be admitted to an MBA program, and so you probably want to have the short list of here's the ones that you may be qualified for, and determining from those deadlines, do any of them require that you be admitted or have any other criteria that might be pending the outcome of your MBA applications. Some of them will not, and so you may be able to apply to some while your application to business school is pending, or maybe right after you get admitted, you may be able to submit an application. But usually there's several months prior to starting business school, so figuring out what those look like is important. I did include a resource that you might want to look into further. It's called petersons.com, and there's a scholarship search option within there where you can indicate here's the program that I'm applying for, it's an MBA, and some other identifying information about yourself, and it will pull up some scholarship opportunities that might be a good fit for you, and then you'll have to go and research them further. For those of you that are in the U.S., the public library is another great resource. There's some pretty thick reference books that you can either research at the library or possibly check out of a library, that each page of the book is different scholarship opportunities. Some of them are for undergrads, some of them are for graduate students, some of them are for MBA specifically, some might be for other disciplines. But like I said, if you want to reduce the amount of debt that you're taking in business school and increase the amount of funding through outside sources that might be available, I encourage you to look into these scholarships. Let me tell you a little bit about the scholarships that are available from the University of Rochester for our MBA program that I think will be of interest, particularly given that we have not hit any of the deadlines yet for 2016, so there's ample time to submit an application for scholarship funding through the business school. We do offer partial and full tuition scholarships. They are merit-based. This past year, just over 70% of our incoming MBA students did receive funding, so a number of different scholarships that are available. We have a number of foundations as well as individuals, some who are alums and others who are just generous friends of the school, who have provided funding, and we are looking for individuals who would be a match for that funding. We also have a scholarship weekend every year at the end of February, and this is an opportunity, it's invitation only for a select group of admitted MBA students. Individuals who come for the weekend will be assessed through a group case competition, a group interview, and a written assessment, as well as we'll take under guidance your previously submitted application materials. And students that come are guaranteed whatever level of funding that they may have already been offered at the time of admission, and they're being considered for additional incremental funding by attending the weekend here in Rochester. And I would say the majority of students who come for the weekend are given an increase in funding, and our largest full tuition scholarships, as well as some full tuition scholarships with additional living stipends, are awarded to students who have come for the scholarship weekend. We also offer graduate assistantships. Most of those are for second-year MBA students, and they would be based on your Simon academic performance in the first year. For the opportunities working with faculty, there are also some graduate assistantship positions that are offered to second-year MBA students working in different departments, and those are opportunities that are going to be based more on your skill set. You know, they may require a minimum GPA of a 3.0, which is the GPA requirement to graduate from the Simon MBA program, but they're going to be focused more on your aptitude to fit the type of work that you're doing, say working in the admissions office or the career management center, and there'll be less emphasis placed solely on your GPA in your first year of the program. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the different scholarship partnerships that the University of Rochester Simon Business School has. Currently, some of these are affiliations you may already be aware of. The Consortium for Graduate Study and Management, of which I'm a board member, and the Forte Foundation are just fantastic organizations. In both of these cases, the assignment admissions office makes the decision on scholarships for students, and so we will be the reviewer of applications to our MBA program, and a select group of admitted students are offered these fellowships. But they do have additional benefits beyond the financial benefit, where students have access to opportunities for internship and full-time job opportunities, and an enhanced network of like-minded professionals from other top business schools that you will be able to connect with both during your MBA experience and even after you graduate. The University of Rochester has the Rochester Pledge, which is, excuse me, a commitment to our U.S. military veterans. It's part of the post 9/11 GI Bill, and individuals are guaranteed funding for their MBA studies. And so that's something, as long as you've designated that you're qualified through your previous or current military service, you would automatically be considered for that funding during the admissions process. We also have partnered with Teacher America and the Peace Corps and offer scholarship support that's guaranteed for students who are admitted to the full-time MBA program, and we can talk more about those opportunities if you have the requisite amount of service through either of those fantastic organizations. But we make scholarship decisions at the time of admission, and so that information is communicated to you along with your admission offer. The scholarship decisions that we make are considering you on a variety of different qualitative and quantitative metrics. The quantitative metrics, of course, are the ones that are easy to evaluate, things like your test scores and your transcripts and your years of prior work experience and your recommendation ratings. But those are, I would say, equally important as the qualitative assessment, which is less tangible but just as important. We're looking at your leadership potential, your teamwork skills, your communication and interpersonal skills, why you want to do your MBA and why Rochester would be a good fit for your MBA, and anything else that might be highlighted in your candidacy. And that's being evaluated not just on a absolute perspective, but also on a relative perspective compared to other people we have in our candidate pool. But the scholarship decisions are communicated at the time of admission to help with your planning. The loan decisions, if you're applying for loans, are typically a delayed communication, a little bit closer to when you're enrolling, and you'd work closely with the financial aid office on that piece. So I want to talk a little bit about next steps and also encourage you, if you haven't already started to think about what questions you still have, please go ahead and start typing those in, and I will be happy to answer questions. And just to clarify, I'm happy to answer questions about scholarships and financial aid. I'm also happy to answer questions about the admissions process or anything specific about the University of Rochester and the Simon Business School. So feel free to ask any questions on that spectrum, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. So as far as next steps in the admissions process and financial aid process for the Simon MBA, we have an application deadline that's coming up in about 2.5 weeks on November 15th. That's our round 2 application deadline. And for students that apply by November, we guarantee a decision in mid-January for whether or not you've been admitted, as well as scholarship, and that would also qualify you for consideration for scholarship weekend. We also do have a January 5th deadline. That is the last application deadline for the scholarship weekend consideration. We do still have some scholarships that you could be considered for if you apply into the springtime, but the scholarship weekend in late February does require an application no later than January, and we also will give priority for candidates who've applied for the earlier rounds, just from a timing standpoint. We do not have a formal application process for scholarship consideration. It's just a matter of indicating yes in the online application. I strongly recommend, like I said, looking into different sorts of outside scholarship support. And after you're admitted, we'd encourage you to work through the loan application process. And the only reason to wait until after admission is that one of the important pieces for the loan application process is how much funding do you need. And you won't really be able to answer that question until you know where you're admitted and whether or not you're getting scholarship support or not from that school. that's a very important question to understanding what the cost of attendance is going to be. And so, like I said, we are going to move to Q&A. I've included my contact information because I know that I may not be able to get to all questions, or you may have a question that you prefer to ask one-on-one as opposed to having addressed through the online audience. And so I encourage you, if you have those questions, you're welcome to reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to be a resource. And so if you just want to bear with me for a few minutes, I do have a bunch of questions here, and I want to see how many of these I'm going to be able to get to. So let me just start to scroll through. Let's see what we got here. So first question is, can we participate in Scholarship Weekend virtually? So no, you cannot. It requires you to come to Rochester. We typically have between 50 and 75 students that come to campus, and the case competition and the group interview are interactive, face-to-face. And I would say it's just as important for you to have that opportunity to meet and engage the other admitted students. It's a great opportunity to make those early connections with a number of students who will enroll. It's a pretty high percentage of students who end up actually enrolling in the program relative to those who attend, but you don't have to know for sure that you will be enrolling in the program. You don't have to have already submitted your enrollment deposit to participate in the weekend. But it is here in Rochester. We provide hotel accommodations and meals while you're here for that weekend. You just need to get yourself to Rochester. So we'll provide the accommodations and transportation once you're here in the city. And it's a lot of fun. There's usually a few social things that we have where you're meeting and interacting with faculty and current students. We have alumni that come in from outside of the area that you're able to network with as well. And there's usually an opportunity to see a little bit of the city as well while you're here in Rochester. So I have a question here about scholarship opportunities available for international students. And so I didn't mention that specifically, so let me talk a little bit about the scholarships for University of Rochester. We have scholarships for domestic and international students. The majority of our scholarships are available to both domestic and international students, and there's not a different application process for domestic or international students. So all you need to do is indicate that you're interested in scholarship support, and you will automatically be considered for scholarships. And although a few of the scholarships may be specific to your background or your career interests or things like that, a number of the scholarships are more general, and so you would be able to be considered just based on submitting that question saying that you're interested in scholarship support. So I have another question, it looks like, from an international student. Wondering if I can elaborate a little bit on the funding sources that we can use or shown for getting a student visa. So from my experience, scholarships is one of the things that you can use for obtaining your student visa. There's a line item that says funding from the school, and so if you're receiving a scholarship from the school, that would be noted. Typically, you're going to be using your personal funds that you may have set aside and indicating that. If you do have any funding from your government, whether that be a loan or a grant that has already been pre-selected for, you can certainly indicate that as well. And that varies by student and by school as to what's available. The majority of students that I know are using their own personal funds as well as scholarship support from Simon for proving their funding to get their student visa. They may be pursuing loans. Usually that's a little bit later in the process that would come through due to timing issues, but there may be a possibility for using loans for getting your student visa as well. So that could be explored more on an individual basis. So I have a question here, someone asking about the application fee to our MBA program. The application fee is $150. There are a few different ways to possibly waive that application fee. If you go to our website, we have a page on an application fee waiver option, and if there's about 6 or 8 different categories where you can possibly waive it. We waive it for military veterans. Automatically, we waive it for individuals coming to us from the Peace Corps and Teach for America. We have a number of partner schools where it's automatically waived, including alumni from the University of Rochester. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at that. You may be pleasantly surprised to learn that your application fee could actually be waived for when you're applying to our MBA program. So I have a question here about average GMAT score and average age of your MBA class that I want to answer. I don't have the average GMAT offhand. I think it's somewhere in the mid-660s, but the middle 80% range is from like the low 600s into the low 700s, and that's probably a better gauge in terms of what we're looking for. I mean, the GMAT is something that gives us some basic guidance as to your credentials and your capability of being successful in the program, and we'll look at both the quant and the verbal on the GMAT, but we're going to look just as closely at your undergraduate record, what you studied, how you did in school, and both of those factors are going to help us to assess your academic readiness for the program. Our average age for the MBA class was around 5.5 years, and the large majority of students enrolling had at least 3 years of work experience. I think it was somewhere around 75 to 80%. So it's not a minimum. We have a few early career candidates who we enroll in the program each year, but the majority of early career candidates would say less than 2 years of work experience. But I consider a specialized master's program, a master's in finance, a master's in marketing analytics or accountancy or business analytics. We have programs in each of those areas, and those are very much geared towards students currently in undergrad or maybe with, say, like a year or so of work experience. So I have a question from someone who was a few minutes late getting onto the broadcast and is wondering if there will be a recording of today's session later on. Absolutely. It won't be immediate. It might be a few days or up to a week afterwards that it'll be available. If for some reason you have questions that you'd like me to address individually, you're welcome to reach out to me after today's session, and I'd be happy to connect you with one of the admissions officers. I have a question from a student about how our MBA program is ranked worldwide. Glad you asked. Happy to share that information. Financial Times ranks our MBA program number 3 in the world for economics, number 5 in the world for finance. Our MS Finance program is a top 10 ranked program. We're ranked number 8 by Bloomberg Business Week for our career placement for the ranking that just came out last week for the percentage of students placed. So that's just amazing. And there's quite a bit of work that we've done on the past year to make sure that all of our students are really satisfied with their MBA experience. And so you're going to see kind of a consistency in the ranking and reputation of the school, even if you were to go back a few years. One of the ones that we're most proud of is our ranking on ROI. We're ranked in the top 10 for our return on investment for our MBA program, and that's among private U.S. business schools. And so sometimes there's a perception that if you're a private university that it's going to be a more expensive program. I'm pleased to say that the jump in between pre-MBA and post-MBA salary is something where our students are typically recouping their investment in business school in just a few years, usually around 3 years, and that's offset by the level of scholarship support that they're able to obtain as they're going through the MBA experience. So really very strong value and just a lot that you can expect from our MBA program in our business school. So another question from a student asking about job opportunities. So we're kind of moving away from financial aid here. So I'm happy to talk about that as well. For the class of 2015, we had 96% of our students who secured a job opportunity within 3 months after graduation, which is just fantastic. I think 100% of students who are looking for an internship secured an internship. The average compensation was, I think, around 112, 113,000 for salary and bonus, and that's based on the typical U.S. News and World Report ranking. They have a particular calculation that they use for the average compensation. So really competitive in terms of compensation, and the amount of effort that the Career Management Center provides to support students in their job search is very significant. We have a very competitive ratio of full-time staff to MBA students, and students have an opportunity for one-on-one sessions with the Career Management Center office. I think it's probably also important to give context on the kind of companies that are hiring our students, because I think that that's almost as important as the average results. And so I'll list a few of the companies that were hiring our MBA students over the past 3 years or so. Amazon.com, Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Deloitte, Accenture, Bain & Co., Disney, Eli Lilly, Federal Express, General Electric, let's see here, Goldman Sachs, PricewaterhouseCoopers, so a significant number of opportunities. I think we had Facebook on campus for the first time a few weeks ago for recruiting opportunities for our students. I think Amazon was also on campus over the past few weeks recruiting our students. And so just some fantastic opportunities with some of the corporate relationships that we have. And we're also doing quite a bit of recruiting out of our New York City location as well. So we're based in Rochester, but we have a campus location in New York City that's been a fantastic connection for our students for networking and for interviewing and job opportunities. So I have a question here from a student about what the role of GPA and consideration for scholarships, and does a low GPA need to be offset by a good GMAT score? You know, is there a certain GMAT level that you would need to have to offset a poor GPA? So there's not a formula. I think you probably wish that there was, so that you'd have kind of an easy understanding of what happens, but it's definitely more case by case that we would review students for scholarships. The majority of students that are admitted to the program are somewhere between a B average and an A average. So on a 4.0 scale, that might be a 3 out of a 4. But we realize that for a number of our students, both our international students as well as some of our domestic students, your GPA might not be on a scale of 4, and so we'll look individually at your transcripts to get a sense of both your cumulative GPA as well as what might have happened during undergrad that contributed to your score. And if your GPA is low, it might be worthwhile explaining that in your optional essay. You might also want to spend a little bit of time making sure that your GMAT score is as good of a reflection of your capabilities as possible, and so just putting the appropriate effort into preparation for the GMAT. But yes, a GMAT score that's higher could absolutely offset a GPA that's a little bit lower. Similarly, a GMAT that's a little bit lower can be offset by a GPA that's a little bit higher. It's not, we don't require that the GMAT and the GPA have to be above a certain threshold to automatically be considered for scholarship. It's, like I said, a case-by-case review for each candidate as we're considering them for not only admission but also for funding. So I have a question about from a student about what's the duration of our MBA program. It's a 22-month MBA program. Students typically start in late July or early August, and they graduate typically end of May or early June 2 years later. The summer between the first and second year is designated for an internship, which the school helps to facilitate. We don't provide the internship for. You need to go and interview for it, but we provide a lot of support and resources from the few months before you begin the business school experience all the way through the first year and the second year. Everything from coaching and support on how to find a job and the kinds, how to prepare for your job search, as well as actually getting you connected with different companies and alumni and recruiters for various job opportunities. Okay. I'm going to scan back through these questions one more time. I think I've missed a few, and so I'm going to try to catch those. If you have other questions, I'm going to get to as many more as I can. You're welcome to continue asking them, and I see we have about 14 more minutes. I'll stay on through that duration to answer as many of these as possible. So I have a general question from a student that's asking about, you know, the availability of scholarships relative to where a school is ranked and kind of the competitiveness and kind of where should you target for admission and scholarship. And I think it's an intensely personal question. It really depends on what's most important to you. There's maybe some subtle differences in the types of schools in the top tiers, say the top 50 MBA programs, but there's a lot more things that are similar amongst those schools in terms of the student experience and the job opportunities that are available and the return on investment. And so I think you need to make a decision as to what's most important to you. You know, is the financial component one that's going to be critical in what the type of school that you would choose to attend, or is it less important? And you know, develop a target list of schools where there's several that you feel reasonably confident that your profile would make you an attractive candidate, not only for admission but also for scholarship, and some that might be a little bit more of a stretch, and then see what happens. A lot of it depends on the applicant pool for the particular year, and so you know, that may depend on how things have been trending as to whether or not you're going to have you know, a strong chance to be admitted, or whether it's going to be a little bit more of a stretch. But you know, I'd encourage you to find a range of schools where you feel that there's strength in the academic preparation and the career opportunities that you're looking for. Geography may be another factor that's important, depending on whether you're looking at the East Coast or the West Coast, or international opportunities, things like that. So let's see what else we have. So I have a question here. Do I need to make a down payment once I join a business school? So this is a school-specific question. I can comment about University of Rochester. We require an enrollment deposit of $1,500 for an initial securing of your spot in the class, and then a second additional $1,500 to reconfirm and issue your I-20 if you're an international student, or to secure your spot and guarantee your participation in orientation if you're a U.S. domestic student. And so it's a total of $3,000. You can certainly pay the $3,000 all up front if you want to, but we offer the convenience of 2 installments because we realize that for some students, you know, coming up with that amount of funding is a little bit of a budgeting challenge, but certainly that's part of the reason why I mentioned earlier about really doubling down on your savings and getting your finances in order. You know, there will be a fair number of expenses related to the application process, visiting schools, and ultimately making an enrollment deposit that will require cash. And so you need to make sure that you have your finances in order to be able to handle all of those expenditures, as well as obviously, you know, hopefully to have some that might be set aside for, you know, helping out with some of your MBA expenses as well. So I have a question here from a student that is asking about, does the MBA admissions committee put special emphasis on certain types of work experience? And they give an example of NGO experience. I think that that's a school-specific question as to how much value an admissions committee is going to put on that relative to other kinds of experiences. And I think probably to some extent, it depends on how it relates to the story that you're telling and what you want to do. What's your motivation for your post-MBA career plan? And, while we want to see well-rounded individuals or individuals that are showing initiative, I don't think that's the only way to do it. And it really does need to be linked to your passions, or something that's important to you as an individual. And so, you need to have an answer for why did you choose to pursue this particular initiative, and if the only motivation is trying to get into business school or impress the admissions committee, that sort of thing is going to be fleshed out if it seems, flash of the pan or just kind of short-term thinking. So I'd encourage you to be intentional and thoughtful. The admissions committee is typically looking for individuals that are, committed to some sort of a sustained passion or interest, and so figuring out how this weaves into your overall storyline of who you are as a candidate is going to be important, and that's going to vary by individual. I think each business school would be disappointed if they enrolled an entire class cohort that was all the same type of student. That while there may be a little bit more tendency to students that have a certain kind of background, either based on strengths of that particular school or something like that. At the end of the day, the benefit to the learning experience and the student network and the alumni network is going to be based on diversity as well as commonality, and finding the appropriate balance of both is important. And most admissions offices are going to be talking about diversity and geography and citizenship and pre-MBA work experience and personality and just a whole lot of other things. And so those, I'd encourage you to be yourself, because that's probably where you're going to be strongest when you're going through the admissions process. So I have a question here about how we interview candidates, particularly candidates from overseas. We typically will do some interviews face-to-face when we're recruiting outside of the U.S. Some of that recruiting has already occurred during the August, September, October period. So we did do some early interviewing for candidates who were already going through the admissions process. And we will do a lot of our interviews over Skype. So it will be a face-to-face video interview. Sometimes we do get back for a second visit to some locations, but most of our interviews will be done over Skype, and that's given the same weight as if it was a face-to-face interview here in Rochester or a face-to-face interview in another part of the U.S. We realize that it's difficult for all of our international students to interview face-to-face here in Rochester, although we would certainly welcome and encourage a face-to-face interview here in Rochester. We do have a few visit weekends throughout the year. The next one is in early December, and we would love to see you visit. And that's actually a great segue into the next question I see here, which is how important is it to visit a business school? Is it the best way, what's the best way if you can't visit an interview prior to admission? So visiting campus is helpful. It's not helpful just for you to, show that you're interested in the school, but it's also a great way to check the school out. It's typically almost like a two-way interview. You're interviewing people that are affiliated with a school and able to observe some things firsthand. We're interviewing you while you're here with us. But again, that might not be financially feasible or just logistically feasible depending on where you live and what kind of work schedule you have. If you cannot visit, I highly recommend getting connected with current students. We have a page on our website where you can see profiles of current students and you can connect with them directly. They've volunteered to make themselves available for email conversations or Skype conversations or phone conversations with prospective students, and so you can reach out to a student directly if you're interested in having a conversation. At a later stage of the admissions process, we may also be able to connect you with an alum. Most of our recruiting travel does include current students or alumni who are there with admissions officers, and so that's a great way to connect with alumni and talk about the school as well. If you visit our website, you'll see information about the upcoming travel schedule that we have, the remaining travel we have for this admission season, and you're welcome and encouraged to register for one of those sessions and meet us out on the road when we're traveling. We also do our own webinar series outside of Beat the GMAT, and that's a great way to connect directly with our admissions committee. We run application tip sessions, we run sessions with current students and other topical sessions, and that's a great way to learn more about the school and make sure that you're having an opportunity to stay engaged. Okay, we're down to our last 4 minutes. We're running out of time for more questions. I might be able to take one more, so feel free if you haven't had your question answered. Feel free to ask it again. There's so many questions in the queue here. I'm not having a little bit of trouble remembering which ones I've answered and haven't. So please be patient as I scroll through these one more time to see if I have time to answer one more. Let's see. So I have a student asking about how we pick our class and, you know, just the overall class mix. Are we looking for a certain sort of mix of students from different backgrounds? And, you know, we are looking for some level of diversity. Simon historically has been a very internationally friendly student body. Typically, you know, upwards of 40% of our students enrolling from outside of the U.S. And within that, students from a number of different countries. But we take a look at the entire applicant pool, and we're looking for interesting backgrounds. We're looking for some common traits. Students that have the drive and motivation to be successful here, students that have clear career focus and have career interests that align with the types of opportunities that we typically have available, students that have strong interpersonal and communication skills, strong teamwork and leadership aptitude, and have had demonstrated career success that would cause them to be competitive when they go into their full-time job search. Beyond that, though, we're looking for really interesting things that students have done, and that could be in their careers or even outside of their careers. And that's where I think we have the most fun getting to know our students during the admissions process, and it's really a very individual one-to-one sort of process, both the admissions interview as well as reading the applications. And we spend a lot of time talking about this during admissions committee, the interesting things, the life experiences our students have had, what they've chosen to get involved with outside of work, outside of school, as well as the interesting things that they've done in their career paths. We have a lot of students that were not business majors in undergrad that have done some very interesting things before business school, and that really adds to the learning experience both in the MBA program and beyond. And so we're really interested in finding a nice cross-section of industry backgrounds and functional backgrounds, but with a common interest in pursuing an MBA, and that really creates the most enriching experience, not only for the students inside the classroom, but also for outside of the classroom. We have a number of different student organizations, clubs, some that are industry focused, some that are affinity focused, and some that are social, like our Uncorked Simon Wine Club and our Simon Volunteers organization. It's our service club. And so there's so many different ways for you to get involved, and the best way for us to predict your involvement as a business school student is going to be based on what you have chosen to get involved with prior to business school, and those are things that we'll be looking to learn about you when you go through the admissions process. So we encourage you to share those experiences with us on your resume and your interview and your essays. Those will definitely be things that we're interested in learning about. So as we're winding down, I just wanted to remind you of our November 15th application deadline. It's right around the corner. We do have a Simon Business School application tips webinar tomorrow. So you're welcome to register for that. You need to go to our simon.rochester.edu website in the full-time MBA section. There will be an option under admissions where you can indicate you're interested in registering for that webinar, and we'd love to connect with you there. If you can't attend that webinar but are interested in learning more about Simon, feel free to send me an email or feel free to call our admissions office. We're open between 8:30 a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, and one of our admissions staff members would be happy to speak with you and help you learn more about the school. So thanks for your time today. It's 1 o'clock. I want to be mindful to your time, but you've been a real fantastic audience with lots of great questions, and I wish you all the best in your plans for business school. Have a great afternoon.